exploring the culture, the adventure, and the impact of martial arts. That's what Kung Fu Podcast is all about. And I'm your host, T.W. Smith. Thank you so much for joining me today and including me as part of your martial arts journey. Today we're going to be picking right up in part 2 of the 3 missing fundamentals of combative training, an essay by Jamie Clubb. If you missed part 1, I would highly encourage you to go back through and listen to that. It begins with the presentation of what it is to be a critical thinker, what it is like when someone new is just starting to research new material, new styles, and new techniques. What are some of the pitfalls that they can run into? Then we also go through the first fundamental that is oftentimes missing in combative training. If it's your first time here at the Kung Fu Podcast, welcome. One of the things about this program is I try to do a good job in presenting information for almost any style of practitioner that they could use during the development of their own martial arts or in their teaching process. One of the things that you would find out very quickly if you follow Jamie Clubb is that he enjoys the critical thinking process. And you can follow Jamie by going to kungfupodcast.com/Jamie, and it'll take you right over to most of his work. As we're discussing critical thinking, it's always important to try to define it, at least as what we're going to be talking about it during this particular episode. And as we have often said before, defining something is all the difference in between trying to communicate and understand, because there are many terms that can have a lot of different meanings. Critical thinking, though, is kind of in a box. You pretty much know what it means, but let's make sure that we have a good definition. It says that critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. Well, as you can tell by the definition, it is woven together, but it is in the weaving that provides you the critical thinking process, that you move things back and forth and you twist it and turn it, look at it by observing, base some thoughts and feelings on the experiences that you've had, but you also use reflection and, as it says, reasoning as well. But you know, sometimes to learn about something, it is easier to see how someone else uses it, or in this case, another group. So instead of martial arts for a few minutes, let's look at the medical and clinical professions, an area that I continue to work in, and how do they view or use critical thinking. In some presentations, they may refer to casual thinking or logical thinking. Here's an example of a Harvard medical presentation that uses critical thinking as part of the process, and it was delivered by Richard Schwarzenstein, MD. He's the executive director of the Carl Shapiro Institute for Education and Research. He is the Faculty Associate Dean for Medical Education, Professor of Medicine, Harvard Medical School. I guess all that says he is one sharp and smart guy. He gives an example of where a 60-year-old man presents with a complaint of shortness of breath that has gradually gotten worse over 2 years. Now he can only walk about 50 yards, at which time he stops with this sensation of he's suffocating, and he's got this real urge to breathe. His wife says that he's been wheezing when this happens. Now it's also important for you to know that the patient is obese, smokes 30 packs a year, has had asthma since childhood, has a current blood pressure at rest of 160/90 and a heart rate of 92. Now just to check it, you go for a walk with him, and after 50 yards, sure enough, the breathing starts to get labored, the patient appears diaphoretic, his chest exam demonstrates wheezing. What's the diagnosis? There's a possibility of diastolic dysfunction, where the left ventricle can't handle the increased blood volume load that's placed on it with exercise. Dr. Schwarzenstein presents that the physician may use what is described as pattern recognition, which is equal to experience-based non-analytical reasoning. In this Harvard presentation, they walk you through a specific model that evaluates 3 core components that Dr. Schwartzstein describes as, quote, must be acquired in order for the learner to become a critical thinker, end quote. So let's take a moment. How would that apply to us? The martial artists. Well, there's no doubt that knowledge, skills, and attitudes are certainly 3 things. They almost sound like 3 traditional martial arts pillars. And as to martial arts, Jamie says that this does apply to us because attitudes matter, skills matter, and of course, knowledge matters. The second fundamental missing in combative training is skepticism. Jamie writes, critical thinking is woefully absent from the martial arts world. Martial arts subculture is largely based on a simple principle of following a teacher without question. Likewise, the system or style is considered to be sacred. Nevertheless, critical thinking has played a huge role in the development of virtually all martial arts. Every system or style has its root in one teacher's critique. All the great founders were skeptics to some degree. However, they were also human and prone to seeing everything from their perspective. As time moved on, they became surrounded by sycophants and further entrenched in believing that their way was the only true way. Martial artists have done a great job of bringing scientific concepts into the refinement and progression of their systems, but few have fully embraced the scientific method as a whole. The martial arts cross-trainer needs to apply critical thinking on his journey. This can make the quest quite lonely, as our natural instinct is to try to find a tribe. Martial artists who switch styles will typically regard their new style like a new relationship and convince themselves that everything about the new class is better than the last one. On the other side of this coin, a good number of martial artists will spend their time cross-training, telling everyone about the greatness of their base art. Rather than doing their best to completely absorb new material, they will preach to their unfortunate training partner about what they do and why they do something in the main system that they train. The critical thinker needs to be wary of both of those temptations. The martial arts critical thinker engages with the material and then properly questions it with a rational and logical mind. Through this process, the individual cross-trainer should understand that there is no certainty that anything will work, but he will also start accumulating a list of the most probable options. Due to the tribal nature of martial arts and the lack of overall transparent regulation, irrational thinking has touched virtually every system of combat in some way or the other. Pre-scientific ideas have persisted to be a part of many martial arts systems. Sometimes they remain as part of an appeal to tradition argument with the various schools wishing to continue a lineage. However, many modern systems don't need such an excuse to buy into all sorts of quackery and unproven pseudo-scientific concepts. Likewise, philosophical and religious concepts have been forcefully melded with the practice of martial arts and absorbed as absolutes. This dogma takes many different forms, and this appeal to novelty is just as responsible as the appeal to tradition for the continued propagation. Cults of personality have also arisen where followers support the belief that their leader can never be wrong. The martial arts cross-trainer needs to be able to recognize these factors both in others and in themselves. There is at least one caveat the eager skeptic or critical thinker must take on board before he questions everything. Be wary of pseudo-skepticism. The pseudo-skeptic denies rather than doubts. He is more of a cynic than a skeptic, or is keen to cast scorn over anything outside of his own narrow view. The pseudo-skeptic masks their confirmation bias with scientific-sounding language, but fail to adopt the scientific method. They may also use a double standard, where they'll apply this keen skepticism to one concept, and yet not to their preferred choice of martial arts. On the other hand, he might attempt to bolster his argument by attempting to drag down a view accepted by mainstream science as an equal opinion. Reasoned and informed questioning should be a regular part of healthy learning. Skepticism allows the martial arts cross-trainer to truly free their mind and to resist certainty while allowing logical methods such as Occam's razor and the scientific method to lead them to the most effective solutions. Pause of essay. So Occam's razor is a problem-solving principle attributed to William Occam, who lived from 1287 to 1347. He was an English Franciscan friar and a scholastic philosopher. His principle is often interpreted as stating, among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. I thought it would be important to share with you how important skepticism is in other places. And this lady I'm getting ready to share with you probably won't know by name, but you will definitely know her impact. And thank goodness she was skeptic and challenged authority. She is known as the best nature writer of the 20th century. Her name is Rachel Carson. She lived from 1907 to 1964. During that time, she was the one who spearheaded and challenged the notion that humans could obtain mastery over nature by chemicals, bombs, and space travel. She dedicated most of her work in the studies of ocean life. Her book, titled Silent Spring, that was published in 1962, warned of the dangers to all of the natural systems from the misuse of chemical pesticides, and she questioned the scope and direction of modern sciences of the time. One of the biggest areas that she had an impact on people of that time and us today is her very vocal opposition to the immediate threats to humans and non-humans all throughout nature about this chemical exposure. After World War II, she questioned the government and the private science's assumptions that human domination of nature was the correct course for the future. And one of the biggest areas that she fought against was the government-approved use of DDT. On the website rachelcarson.org, they have a flyer that was printed March 1947. And on that flyer, it has a picture of a woman standing in their kitchen spraying inside of her cabinets. And at the bottom, with government-approved seals, it says DDT for control of household pests. Rachel Carson's skepticism was based in the critical thinking process. She watched how things moved all the way through the course of life and through nature. And she said, this is not going to work. Then she took a position that was different than the ones who had the authority, which leads us into the third fundamental missing in sound combative training: individuality. Jamie writes, martial arts was created as tools to serve people. They are not tangible entities. They are ever-changing concepts shaped by individuals. They evolve and mutate all the time, whether the teachers want them to or not. No one person trains, practices, or teaches exactly the same way as his teacher. Indeed, we have countless examples of teachers changing the mind regarding the emphasis or even core concepts of their system over time. Does that mean each and every student should be taught in their own unique fashion? Unfortunately, there is no empirical evidence that argues tailoring a teaching style to a student's supposed learning style is effective. And this does go against the innate human desire to be seen as an individual, and a huge amount of popularity to try to tailor the teaching to meet the student. Jamie continues by saying, furthermore, it has been argued that purely by playing up to a person's apparent strengths and preferences means that they never get a good opportunity to address their weaknesses. Combat reveals that different people fight differently. We all have different combative personalities, and this can be seen throughout the history of interpersonal violence. Humans have thrived as a species due to the many ways that they can adapt. So, how do we correlate this information? When it comes to cross-training, the individual is running their own show. They are building new data based on previous experiences. Putting an individual at the center of their education needs to be done with care and with a lot of caution. Individualized training shouldn't be about pandering to their wants, preferences, and prejudices of one person. Be that person yourself or your student. Rather, it should be an exploration of an individual's strengths and their weaknesses. A combatant will develop their own style. The way that style is learnt and developed should not be through a straightforward agreement between teacher and student. The teacher seeks to prompt the student to take responsibility for their own education. The teacher acts as an honest advisor, an unbiased critic, and a supportive coach. The teacher doesn't seek to adopt their teaching style to the perceived niceties of a student's learning style, or to feverishly consult a catalog of categories that some supposed education expert has put together. Rather, the martial arts teacher provides an environment that prompts the combative student to find their own way. The student cross-trainer uses their individuality to better understand what works best for them. This is where cross-training defines itself as being more than a sum of its parts. This is where the hours of solo training comes in. This is the time spent recruiting various different partners to test and train outside of formal lessons. Individuality in learning is most successful when it is underpinned by clarification and skepticism. An individual often discovers what they need through clinically testing what they think they want. End of essay. Now, at that one right there, let's just all have a little amen. Because I can tell you, having gone back and forth, there is absolutely no reason to try to change your teaching methods every time you meet someone new. Because once you start to dance that dance with a student, that you're going to try to keep them safe from here and you're going to try to present it this way and that way, that dance never stops. And I can tell you that you end up coming back to the same place of going, wait a minute, we didn't get past this piece. And you end up doing it almost all over again. So as Jamie says, there's no evidence that as a teacher, changing your teaching style will help improve the effectiveness of that teaching. Just make sure it's on course with what the student is trying to learn. What is the direction of your training and their training? Of course, that speaks to the very first fundamental that we mentioned, clarity. It is important, both as a student and a practitioner like myself, and as a teacher, that you get out of your training what you put into it. And if you're just looking to be spoon-fed information from like Sensei YouTube or someone who's just willing to peddle you things over and over again just to keep the money supply coming, you're not going to get anywhere. But before I bring this to a close, let me share with you an article I found written by Ben Thomas, and it's titled, What's Individuality and Where Does It Come From? And it was written for scientificamerican.com. He writes, look back far enough in history and you'll find that the concept of individuality was once synonymous with that of the soul. For millennia, religious leaders taught that God, or the gods, or one's karma, placed a specific soul into one's body sometime around the moment of conception or birth, infusing that body not only with breath and animation, but also with the specific self, unique among all others and distinct from the bodily vessel that contained it. Even in the midst of such dualistic thinking, though, philosophers warred over the questions of how much self-stuff descended directly from the heavens, and how much of it was shaped by a person's life here on earth. Confucius wrote, "By nature, men are nearly alike. By practice, they get to be wide apart." Mr. Thomas continues, and this is the part that was really intriguing for me, and he writes, quote, "Most scientists have understood that genes load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. In other words, DNA does not actually encode your individual traits. It encodes long lists of instructions for building various kinds of biological structures, if and only if the right circumstances arise. In programming terms, much of your DNA could be described as a nested hierarchy of if-then statements, each waiting for the signal to execute the code within it. And many of those signals come not from the DNA itself, but from the environment in which it unzips. When we speak of a gene for Parkinson's disease, for example, we're not talking about a gene that literally encodes instructions for producing the disease's symptoms. We're talking about a certain genetic mutation, tiny alterations in DNA code that can help create those symptoms under certain unfortunate circumstances." End quote. What that means to me is that if you want to ever see what you're capable of, what you could be, you must learn to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, to challenge yourself, to test yourself, and to explore yourself. Then and only then will you have the opportunity to unzip the codes that are within you and find what you're capable of. And that will bring your individual power to any situation, and you can grow from there. Exploring the culture, the adventure, and the impact of martial arts. Thank you so much for joining me today, where we looked at the last two fundamental components that are usually missing in combative training. This was part 2 of an excellent essay put together by Mr. Jamie Clubb. And again, if you'd like to find his work, go to kungfupodcast.com/Jamie. In summary, remember that the 3 fundamental components that is usually missing from most combative martial arts training is clarity. Know what you're trying to do before you go out there to try to learn something. If you know what you're trying to do, then you can sort of differentiate between what might look cool to learn one day as compared to what is it that you need to know now to accomplish your goals. Skepticism, it's okay to ask questions. In fact, it's encouraged. I never want you to take the things that I share with you just at face value. I want you to test them, learn them for yourselves, see how it works. And I can guarantee you that people like Ian Abernathy, Jamie Clubb, Andrea Harkins, Ando Merzwa, and these sorts of folks, when they share something with you, they are perfectly okay for you to go out and test it to see if it works for you. And then, of course, the third and the last main ingredient that is usually missing in combative martial arts training is individuality. Get to know you, yourself. Find the pieces that are woven within you and learn through practice how to make them bigger, better, more effective, more efficient. Take care of yourself. Have a fantastic practice, and I'll be talking with you next week.